Bonjour et merci pour votre patience. Je suis heureux de pouvoir ici dire quelques mots à l'issue de ce G20. Je tiens d'abord à remercier le Premier ministre Narendra Modi. L'Inde, fidèle à ses principes, a tout mis en œuvre pour cette présidence du G20 et pour qu'elle serve d'unité, qu'elle envoie un message justement de stabilité alors que la Russie continue de mener sa guerre d'agression en Ukraine. Et donc, je remercie et félicite le Premier ministre Modi et veux ici rappeler...
I would like to say a few words and say that all our thoughts go to Morocco and its people. They are going through a tragedy which is touching all of us. France yesterday, of course, sent a personal message, directly a message to the King, Mohammed VI, and we stand ready to send resources whenever Morocco tell us it is the right time to do so. We have technicians who stand ready, and this morning the World Bank, the IMF, the African Union and France as well stood together to send across a strong message to Morocco for reconstruction in this context. And our thoughts also go to Brazil, who suffered a major storm recently. In this context of the G20, I would like to commend the African Union for joining G20 as a full-fledged member. As you know, France was amongst the first ones to support this candidacy, and in Bali we launched a call. At the time, Macky Sall was representing the African Union, and what was at the time a wish is now a reality. The G20 will sit at the table where the decisions are taken, and I'm very pleased that what we were calling for in Bali has now been approved by all. First of all, this G20 confirms once again the isolation of Russia. A vast majority of the G20 members condemn the war in Ukraine and its impacts. And we've been dealing with the economic and food consequences of this war precisely to maintain the unity of the planet. And the entire G20 also commits to a just and lasting peace in Ukraine, and I insist on these words. That's in accordance with the UN Charter, and also is a reminder of our support to the principle of territorial integrity. After the summit we organized in Paris that led to the Paris Pact for the Peoples and the Planet, a number of things that we launched have been endorsed here. And what I would like to tell you, what is important here, is that this agenda we've been promoting for a number of years has moved forward on the occasion of this G20 in India. First of all, what we advocated in Paris and what led to this Paris Pact for the Peoples and the Planet was reiterated with many African countries ahead of this summit. They signed together with France a piece in which we were expressing our support for the pact. Let me remind you of the four underlying principles. We need not choose between the fight against poverty and the fight for the planet. Second, it is for each country to choose its own path with the support of the international community. Thirdly, we need a major leap when it comes to financing, and all of that very much presided over the conclusions on this topic. When it comes to mobilizing international financing to tackle poverty and climate change, this G20 acknowledged a number of developments. First of all, we exceeded the $100 billion of reallocation of SDRs. It is in 2020, at the time that we decided with the IMF to issue some new SDRs. Then, when we worked on financing the African economies, we agreed to reallocate $100 billion to Africa. And now, and this is the work we undertook back in 2020, it is at last, genuinely $100 billion that are being reallocated. And France did more than what it was requested to do. We reallocated 40% of our SDRs. So I, of course, call upon all countries to continue and, most importantly, to deliver on what they committed to be doing. And next, this year, we will reach the target of $100 billion to finance climate transition in developing countries. And in June, we had a report in Paris telling us that we were about to reach that target. It is a commitment that was made in 2015, and we exerted more pressure so that we could do it. Third element, we could see that what was done in Paris, and remember we had this first meeting of joint financing, all multilateral developing banks attending with the major financial institutions. Well, we got some results. We're increasing the risks taken by our developing banks and development banks, and we're increasing substantially the public finance simply by taking more risks with the existing mechanisms. And this is something that was agreed upon in Paris in June. And at the G20, we all agreed upon this commitment taken in Paris with the goal of having $200 billion of private finance for developing countries. So all of that was initiated in Paris in June and has been approved by the G20. So that's an endorsement of the 4Ps pact. But we want to do more in terms of efficiency, and this is also a commitment that we made in Paris. First of all, we support a deep reform of global governance. This is the Security Council, but as well the World Bank and the IMF. They have to reflect today's reality and in terms of demography and economy as well. And then we want to increase the available tools. That's why we want to replenish the World Bank, and France is supporting that so that the emerging countries have a greater role to play. And we want, of course, to increase as well what is allocated to the issue of climate change. And we want some further commitments on behalf of the emerging countries to phase out coal. Next, the IMF. Here again, we expect some greater commitments by the emerging countries when it comes to restructuring the debt of African countries. We stand ready to do more, and we said it today. So it is the very same agenda, a greater financing mobilization around the world. And let me tell you that France upgraded its commitments, and we reached 0.5% of our GDP allocated to development projects, and we also want the same to happen at the international level. And this is the reason why we committed to the replenishment of IFA, the International Fund for Agricultural Development, and a meeting will be taking place in December. And I would like to thank President Alvaro Lario of IFAD for being with us today. We need IFAD because IFAD is very much fighting to increase the productivity and the efficiency of the agriculture systems all around the world, in particular given that they are mostly impacted by the war. And then we expressed our support to a number of initiatives taken in Paris or in Nairobi because this massive financing leap also requires some additional resources. So we need to find some new international resources. And together with President Ruto, and allow me to thank him for the work done in Nairobi. So with President Ruto, we agreed to set up a task force on international taxation, and I commend his initiatives for a new kind of carbon tax with a genuine price. So it is the very same agenda and that we are working on climate change. And on Friday, the progress report of the Paris Accord was published, and we're not on the right trajectory. And the G20 is a key player in this. Today, we acknowledge a goal of tripling the production of renewable energy, and we also have the same ambition for low carbon technology, including the nuclear energy. And we're also committed to developing a major vast rail corridor between India, Saudi Arabia and Europe, and in order to transport green hydrogen and to speed up the greening of our industries. But this is not enough. Let me tell you that I'm personally very concerned by some sort of a rising state of mind, including within the G20, on the issue of climate. First of all, it is too easy to say for some of the emerging countries that it is only for the wealthiest country to bear the responsibility. The Europeans are facing their responsibility. We have the only credible international commitments with the Green Deal and the Fit for 55. We're the only ones who set some regulations, new regulations, in order to reach carbon neutrality in 2050 and the goals that were set for 2030. I'm very pleased that some join us with this 2050 target, but at the moment only the Europeans have set the tools. We have the 100 billion commitment, as said in June in Paris and reiterated here. But many countries need to do more efforts. One cannot say that we will achieve the Paris Agreement goals without phasing out fossil fuels. And this is very much at the heart of the strategy that we're working on together with our partners for the JETPs, partnerships for a just energy transition together with South Africa, Senegal and Indonesia. And this is very much what we've been discussing with a number of partners, including Prime Minister Modi. But more generally, with all emerging countries, we need to phase out coal, and much faster than we are doing. And we need to work on phasing out oil as well, because I can hear some telling us that beyond 2040, 2045, we could still live with oil while comply with the goals set in the Paris Agreement. But I think this is not the case. This is not true. I know it's difficult. It is troubling for a number of emerging countries. Nonetheless, we have to look at science. Lastly, I would like to tell you that we had a chance to talk about technology. On artificial intelligence, France has a double purpose. We want to develop innovation and investments and make sure there is no technological and digital divide on the issue of artificial intelligence. We want all of the G20 countries to have access to it for their development. And in addition, it is absolutely necessary to regulate these technologies, make sure that there is no fake or manipulation of information and anything that would threaten our democracies. So we support the idea of international regulations, and just like we did on minimal taxation and in other topics, we work together with the OECD. And together with Canada in particular, we launched a partnership for international artificial intelligence, and together with the support of the OECD. And the OECD can gather the international community beyond its members. And it is very much necessary for the purpose of regulating IA. And once again, I would like to commend the Indian presidency of the G20. Brazil will take over, and they have our full confidence. We will work together with them closely on a number of topics: protection of forestry, food sovereignty, social justice. And as you know, since 2018, we've been strongly advocating these topics. Without further ado, I'm all yours for your questions. Mr. President, good afternoon. back to the G20, this compromise seems to be not exactly what France was expecting, and Ukraine expressed their disappointment, whereas Russia seems to be said they were satisfied. So is this due to the emerging countries? Next, on climate change, you express your concerns. You're calling to do more. Is this a bad signal at this G20 ahead of COP28? First of all, let us face it, let's be honest that the G20 is not a forum for political discussions. It was revived at the time of the financial crisis a few years ago. And we're here to mainly talk about economic topics and climate change. So I think the G20 should not get stuck into some other issues. But of course, we know that we disagree on Ukraine, given that Russia is a member of the G20. But as a matter of fact, things have been said. The G20 said it supports a just and lasting peace. This is exactly the opposite of what Russia is saying. And the G20 itself re-expressed our support to territorial integrity and the UN Charter. So that's it. But that being said, this is not the place where we will see some major developments, given in particular what the situation is on the ground. And we have here 16 members of the G20 who voted, approved all the resolutions that condemn Russia. 3 abstained and 1 voted against. And of course, this is Russia. So Russia precisely is in a very isolated position at the G20. Nonetheless, this is not the place for major diplomatic moves. On climate change, I think there's one point, financing, on which we've achieved some major progress. And this is essential, I believe. And I believe we collectively contributed to it. And France, with the summit that we organized back in June with the Pact for the Peoples and the Planet, I believe was helpful for the Indian presidency. But let me sound the alarm. We're not there yet, and I can feel this little tune growing from on different sides, and we have to speak the truth, talking to the emerging countries. It is expensive for us as well. We know what the energy transition costs in terms of public investments, of changing our ways of living for many people, the fears as well that it generates. But it is legitimate and normal that we play that role. At the same time, we need to re-engage with the emerging countries to phase out coal by 2030 and as soon as possible phase out fuel as well. And those who are telling us, emerging countries, no, we're making a lot of money with oil at the moment, so let's not phase it out. This is not possible. Of course, it will take more time for gas, but far before 2050, we need to phase out coal and oil. So let us, of course, there shall be no, we cannot be hypercritical. Merci, Monsieur le Président. Une question d'un média indien.
How do you see the overall trajectory of India-France strategic partnership in the context of the fragmented geopolitical environment? India has decided to procure Rafale fighter jets for the Indian Navy. When can we expect announcement of a deal in this regard? And lastly, in fact, how do you see the overall presidency of India? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Look, first, I think we have a very strong.
Tout d'abord, nous avons un partenariat stratégique extrêmement dynamique. Nous avons un partenariat de défense très fort. Nous l'avons renforcé ces dernières années. La visite qu'a effectuée le Premier ministre indien à Paris le 14 juillet était un moment essentiel dans ce partenariat. Le peuple français était très fier de cette visite. Les Français ont ressenti cette amitié et ce respect pour votre pays et nous avons signé davantage de contrats.
On all the different parts of our defense roadmap, additional contracts and procurements in the months and years to come. On space, we decided a new common partnership. On nuclear, civilian nuclear industry, we have an existing roadmap and we had additional milestone and we will follow up in the weeks to come. And on infrastructure, on economy, on startups, on technology, on transportation, and a lot of sectors, on culture as well, obviously, we will follow up. So I think our partnership from a bilateral point of view is reaching records in all the different sectors. This is why this partnership is not just a bilateral partnership, but I think the actual evidence of a stronger intimacy in terms of strategy for the region and the world. I think we do have the same view that we have to preserve balances in this current environment. We have to resist to the fragmentation of this world, and we have to work together to provide solutions to the rest of the world on what makes sense. It was exactly the philosophy we promoted when we launched, together with Prime Minister Modi in 2018, the Solar Alliance. The International Solar Alliance is exactly one of the best evidence of this philosophy. This is exactly the same we did yesterday together with the Emirates, Saudis and the US and some other colleagues on this corridor from India to Mediterranean Sea. And this is exactly how we worked hand in hand with your Prime Minister for this presidency, with the Paris Summit and this presidency to prepare and create dynamic on a lot of topics from climate to financing. I think this presidency, in this current environment and this fragmented world, with a lot of difficulties, is a very important positive momentum on these critical issues. This is why I do thank you, Prime Minister, and I'm committed to this common agenda, bilateral, strategic and international.
Philippe Ricard du Monde.
Merci, bonjour. Juste une question à propos du Niger.
A question
savoir
about
comment vous
Niger. I
réagissez
would
aux
like to know
accusations de
what
la
the
junte
reaction is to the
qui soupçonne la France, qui accuse la France de préparer une intervention militaire contre le Niger, d'une part, et d'autre part, savoir où en sont les discussions, les réflexions du côté français sur un redéploiement des troupes françaises dont la junte exige le départ. Est-ce que c'est un redéploiement à l'intérieur des frontières du Niger? Est-ce que c'est un rapatriement de certaines forces? Si vous pouviez donner des précisions. Merci.
Merci beaucoup. La France, les forces françaises ont été mises en place sur le sol du Niger à la demande du Niger. Et nous sommes là pour lutter contre le terrorisme à la demande du Niger et de ses instances démocratiquement élues, à savoir le président Bazoum, son gouvernement et son Parlement. Nous avons d'ailleurs eu une action efficace.
We had an efficient action that strongly restricted the activities of terrorists in Niger, and our soldiers who fell in Niger and their families are on my mind as we speak. At the moment, this military junta is taking hostage the president who was democratically elected. So we condemn it. We call upon President Bazoum being set free, and we do not recognize those who led the coup, because President Bazoum does not give up. And should we give in, I will only do it at the request of President Bazoum and in coordination with him, not dealing with those keeping him hostage. And France is currently working in close cooperation with the presidents of the regions, and we strongly support the decisions, the positions taken by ECOWAS. ECOWAS condemned that coup, adopted sanctions like others. And ECOWAS is still working on setting President Bazoum free, and France stands by them and supports them. I have no further comment. The situation is freezing everything de facto because the only person we can talk to is President Bazoum. One more question.
Monsieur le Président, nous avons vu le projet qui a été lancé sur la connectivité. Est-ce que vous pouvez nous en parler et quel rôle la France va y jouer, quel rôle l'Inde va-t-elle y jouer et qu'est-ce que cela apportera à la région et au monde? Merci. Il est très important d'avoir un tel projet qui va de l'Inde à la Méditerranée. Nous sommes engagés pour le financement. Nous sommes en train de travailler avec la Banque mondiale, les États-Unis, l'Union européenne, l'Arabie saoudite, les Émirats arabes unis et un certain nombre d'autres acteurs pour mettre de l'argent en commun pour la réalisation de ce corridor. Deuxièmement, nous allons... donc le projet a été lancé hier et il va nous falloir trouver le financement. Et l'idée, c'est de faire un package unique et de décider de la nature des infrastructures. Ce que nous voulons, donc, ce sont des infrastructures zéro émission, connectivité sur le thème du transport, connectivité en matière de communication, de technologie, et également, nous avons en France de très nombreuses entreprises qui travaillent dans tous ces secteurs, énergie, transport,
I imagine a sort of structure which will decide and allocate different phases, and France and French companies will be part of this overall project. So it was the launching yesterday, and now what we have to do is to streamline everything, to avoid bureaucracy, complexity, and to have a clear and fair involvement of the different parties.
Question pour Mathieu Coache du Monde.
Bonjour Monsieur le Président, Mathieu Coache, BFM TV. Vous avez dit que la France était prête à intervenir en aide au Maroc.
France stood ready to provide some assistance to Morocco when the authorities consider it appropriate. We're now 36 hours down the road, and of course the needs are huge. Would you like the French assistance to reach Morocco as soon as possible? You referred to a message, but did you talk to him? Thank you very much. I had a long discussion with His Majesty the King a few days ago, ahead or before the earthquake. He was then on the plane or on the ground when we texted each other, and I sent him a letter. First and foremost, we want to do what is useful to the Moroccan people, and allow me once again to express our solidarity. My thoughts also go to the millions of binationals, people who are both French and Moroccans, who live in France or in Morocco. This is very much impacting all of us. The Foreign Affairs in Paris or Crisis Center, Minister of the Interior, Defense Ministry as well, they're all working on that and they're available. The Moroccan authorities know exactly what we can provide and when. So, but that, of course, it is now in their hands. It is the local authorities who know what is useful and who can coordinate. So we stand available and we put everything together. And the second when they ask, we will deploy. But, of course, it is for the Moroccan authorities to make the necessary decisions depending on what is happening on the ground. And they're rightly doing what is necessary to properly organize things. Then, in parallel, we are trying to mobilize and get organized. And this is the reason why this morning I talked to the representatives of the IMF and the World Bank and the president of the European Commission and the president, the chair of the African Union, to mobilize at an international level a broader international support to prepare for a speedy reconstruction. So I believe we're doing our utmost from where we are by telling Morocco that we stand available. And I fully trust the Moroccan authorities for being as organized as necessary. And once again, let me express our solidarity and our friendship. One last question.
Bonjour, Monsieur le Président. Je voudrais savoir combien a-t-il fallu à tous les membres du G20 pour parvenir à un consensus sur la déclaration de Delhi. Vous avez également dit que la Russie ne devrait faire partie, ne devrait pas sa place au G20. Est-ce que vous pourriez nous en parler un peu? Donc, vous avez dit que le G20 était une plateforme économique.
It was mistranslated.
Ce n'est pas sa place.
Two remarks. First, I have to confess, perhaps it took some time to our Sherpa, but it was agreed when we arrived at leaders level. So I don't want to overplay our role on the text you got. So between our different capitals and thanks to the work of our Sherpa, the consensus on the written text you got was reasonably easy. I mentioned during my remarks and my introduction what is a success and where we have room to improve, and I will not repeat it. As for Russia and G20, to be clear, my point was to say the core business of this forum is economy and coordination on global affairs, so economy, finance, climate, and these critical issues, but the core business is not stability and security and peace. So it's good sometimes to have this discussion, but we should not stop everything if we disagree on one of these topics. The second remark I made for Russia is that they are a member of the G20 de facto. President Putin is not here because he's sanctioned by a lot of us, and for good reasons, because I think what's happening is very grave and very serious and concerning for everybody. But my point was not to say we should exclude somebody from the club now. I think it's counterproductive. Merci beaucoup, mesdames et messieurs. Nous allons continuer maintenant.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm on my way to Bangladesh now, and I'm very pleased. And once again, let me thank Prime Minister Modi, the Indian authorities, and the Indian people for their hospitality. Thank you.